So we have risk assessment, and who does this? The government. Governments do this. What is that saying? Trust me, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Maybe these people are. Okay, so what is risk assessment? Risk assessment utilizes scientific data to make predictions about what level is dangerous or hazardous for you. Now, what are they going to be looking at? They're going to be looking at how toxic something is, and then you have to also bring in how much exposure do you have to it. So if you live in Pittsburgh and you drive with your windows up and your air conditioner on, or closed up so you're not exposed too much to the air pollution, and then when you get home you walk quickly across your yard or the parking lot into your house, you would have very little exposure. Now, if you're a person who lives in Pittsburgh and has an outside job, say working on the interstate, you would have a much higher exposure level. So these are the things that they have to look at. They look at how toxic is something and how much exposure do you have. So it's a multi-step process. And it's even more complicated than that. Why? Because how do you determine the toxicity to people? What do? You say, I want to test you and see how much poison I can give you before you die. You can't do that, right? So instead, maybe you're torturing mice or something, and mice might have more resistance or less resistance to whatever this toxin is. So toxicity is really hard to calculate. Now, the exposure, on the other hand, is somewhat easier. So when we talk about exposure, it's a three-component. It has three components, and I don't know why I didn't write this on the board. I'm going to have to write it. So exposure involves the concentration. Number one, we're going to have three things. Exposure is going to involve the concentration in the air. Number two, the length of time you are breathing the air. And what do you think the third one is? This one you might have to think about for a second. How hard are you breathing? What is your rate of respiration? Because if you're one of these Zen kind of people and you have very low breathing rate, you're exposed to less of the toxin. So it's the rate of ventilation or breathing. Okay, so based on this criteria, we have some air pollution standards. And so after the slide that deals with toxicity and exposure, there's a slide that has air quality standards on it. And what's interesting is I'd said, we mentioned some of these. We have... I'm trying to read particulate matter, carbon monoxide, sulfur oxides on this list. Notice that we have multiple standards. We have one standard related to 1 hour of exposure, and then a different concentration. When I say standard, it's what level of pollution can you be exposed to if you're going to be out there for an hour versus if you're going to be out there for 8 hours. So we have air quality standards that that look into this end of it as well. So it's not just the toxicity, it's how much exposure do you have? Okay, so we've gotten some laws. I've already started making reference to those kinds of laws, and next we're going to talk about two different laws: the Clean Air Act and the Pollution Prevention Act of 1990.